The importance of fantasy football kickers cannot be understated. We had exactly 8 fantasy kickers get over 10 fantasy points, depending on your scoring format, which mostly everybody's kicker scoring format is largely the same. And we're in playoff time now. No secret to anybody. Every point frigging matters. Now, the day obviously got away from me. I still work a full-time job, trying to give you guys the best content on top of that. So obviously, we're cutting it a little close to Thursday Night Football. Today, I'm going through the top 12 kicker rankings for Week 16 fantasy football. And I am the only fantasy football YouTuber who provides weekly fantasy football rankings for kickers. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into these rankings. So number 1, it should not surprise you. He has been number 1 for a solid month at this point. Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys, taking on the Miami Dolphins in Miami. So last week was obviously a rough week for Brandon Aubrey. The Cowboys only ended up scoring 10 points total. So that left Brandon Aubrey with 4 fantasy points. That's just not good enough for Brandon Aubrey. And that's why his numbers dropped below 11 fantasy points per game. But I want to just take a second to make sure everyone understands the impact that almost 11 fantasy points per game a kicker has on your team. Those are running back 2 numbers right there. Those are wide receiver 2 numbers right there. The impact that has for Brandon Aubrey is massive. Now, I've been saying this for weeks now. I think Dallas matches up very well against Miami. Dallas brings physicality that teams like they've been beaten by, like the Buffalo Bills, like the Philadelphia Eagles, like the Kansas City Chiefs, brought to them. So I think that Brandon Aubrey is going to be in a good shape. Once again, it was an aberration week. They got absolutely smoked in Buffalo. I don't think it happens again. Brandon Aubrey gets a lot of opportunities again. Definitely going to be my number 1 kicker. And then Lucas Havrizik. Hopefully this video gets out to you before the Thursday night game because I think you should play him. Lucas Havrizik of the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Saints on Thursday night. So by the time you're watching this, it may have already passed. I may look like an idiot. I may look really good for having him at number 2. Lucas Havrizik was up there in my rankings last week, and he was a top 13 kicker last week. Like, it wasn't great. He had 8 fantasy points in that game. It wasn't bad, but I do think that the New Orleans Saints actually offer a better matchup because last week they kind of had their way with Washington. The Saints defense is definitely better. So I think he could see a little bit more struggles, which is why I've got Lucas Havrizik at number 2 here. Even though he has missed a couple of kicks this year already, I do think that with this opportunity against the Saints, if he gets opportunities, that's what we can hope for at the kicker position. Number 3, Dustin Hopkins. Dustin Hopkins of the Cleveland Browns taking on the Houston Texans in Houston this week. So Hopkins is the only other kicker averaging over 10 fantasy points per game at this point. Listen, Hopkins has been, like he is just, it's gone a little bit worse for him. Whereas like, this is why I say that fantasy football, we need to look at it from a 4 quarters perspective. The first half of the season, Hopkins was the guy. Actually, the first quarter was Jake Elliott. Then quarters 2 and 3 were kind of belonging to Dustin Hopkins. Brandon Aubrey has overtaken him. But that doesn't mean that Dustin Hopkins has become irrelevant or has gotten to be worse. He's a very good kicker option still. This guy hits big kicks for them, and although he has missed 5 total kicks, 3 field goals, 2 extra points, Dustin Hopkins is on just a perfect offense for this because the offense he's on gets you down there, but they don't always execute. That's what we want in fantasy kickers. Against Houston this week, give me Dustin Hopkins. Number 4, Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens has really rebounded in the second half of the season. Taking on the 49ers in San Fran, I think it's a great matchup. First of all, I kind of have harped on this for a long time. Justin Tucker, for the first several weeks of the season, was not in these rankings. And the reason why is because, first of all, Baltimore's offense was scoring at will and not scoring they were not scoring field goals, they were scoring touchdowns. There wasn't many field goal opportunities for him, so he spent a lot of that first half of the season as a bottom 5 to 10 kicker. The second half of the season is when he's seen this resurgence, getting himself back to 9.4 fantasy points per game. What you also see, and what I've harped on as well, is 6 missed kicks total. That's not Justin Tucker-like at all. That's very abnormal for Tucker. So the fact that he did it is concerning. What's good is that number doesn't keep going up. Like, though a lot of those have been at least a month away. So, you know, those are kind of in the rearview mirror for us. And with the 49ers matchup, they're not going to be able to score at will, I don't think. I think they're going to have a tough go at it. So I could easily see Justin Tucker getting 4 field goal attempts for a high upside game. Justin Tucker, high upside play here at 4. Jake Elliott of the Philadelphia Eagles at number 5. Taking on the New York Giants this week. Now, as I said earlier, I could definitely, like, the first half of the first quarter of the season, Jake Elliott, this was his game. I mean, Jake Elliott was averaging like 11 fantasy points per game. Down to 9.5 fantasy points per game. It's not like he's just all of a sudden a bad kicker. Like, that's not what we're dealing with here with Jake Elliott. Still a very good kicker option. And I do think that in a divisional matchup, where really they need to get out of this rut and the skid that they're currently on, I think this is a good opportunity for Jake Elliott to take advantage of against the Giants, who, based on the way the Eagles have played past several weeks, who's to say they're going to be able to score touchdowns at will? They may be just in a lot of field goal positions because it's a divisional game and the Giants are familiar with this team. And again, divisional games for kickers, very good upside in points. That's why Jake Elliott is at 5. And Evan McPherson at 6. Taking on the Steelers very similarly. Divisional game, give me that matchup. Additionally, with Jake Browning, Evan McPherson has had a very good run, averaging almost 9 fantasy points per game, and a lot of those misses from the field goals, 5 of them, a lot of those are in the rearview mirror, very similar to Justin Tucker. Evan McPherson's a very good kicker in this league. He's got the leg, 56 yards long, hasn't missed an extra point, so he's solid all the time there. And it's a matchup that I do think that Pittsburgh, with the tailspin they're in, it's getting worse, but I could definitely see a world where they hold Cincinnati to, 23 points, and a lot of those are field goals. So I like Evan McPherson's upside in Week 16. Jake Moody of the San Francisco 49ers at 7. Taking on the Baltimore Ravens at home. And Jake Moody he's really hit or miss. Every single week, it's tough to say. Because you could see, like, the extra point attempts long outweigh the field goal attempts. And he's been perfect on 53 extra point attempts this year. 3 missed field goals. This guy's a good kicker. 57-yard long field goal. But he's only averaging 8 fantasy points because he kicks way more extra points than he does field goals. That's the reason why Jake Moody is not higher. And really, Jake Moody early in the season was ranked a lot higher consistently. So against the Ravens, I do think this poses a definitely a much bigger threat than the 49ers have seen in recent weeks. Because even when they played the Eagles, the Eagles were looking way slower, way more tired, worn down. The Ravens are hot right now, and they look very great. On all cylinders, every phase of the game, they look great. So I like the potential here for Jake Moody to get 2 to 3 field goals in this game. That's why he's at 7. Matt Gay at number 8. Taking on the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. So let me just be clear on this one. Matt Gay is currently injured, and he actually missed practice on Wednesday. So by the time you're watching this, he may have already been ruled out. If he plays, though, he rebounds back inside the top 10. Matt Gay had that bad week a couple weeks ago where he got negative points for people. I had to put him in timeout for a week because I was just like, is this the new norm? And by the way, he rebounded last week, had over 10 fantasy points, but he actually missed a couple kicks. So I don't know if this is a health-related issue. Kind of looks like it now that he's got an injury that he's tending to. But with Atlanta being the matchup and the Colts offense, just the way they run, it's such a great opportunity for him to be able to have a good game as long as he plays. So even if he comes in at 85, 90%, I've still got Matt Gay at 8. And Kaimi Fairbairn, what a return he had last week for the Houston Texans as they take on the Cleveland Browns at home. First of all, I love the matchup. The Cleveland Browns are not going to let the Texans score at will, especially as it looks increasingly likely that it's not going to be CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud looks like he's going to be out, and it's going to be a Case Keenum-led team once again. Well, that Case Keenum-led team led Kaimi Fairbairn to 17 fantasy points. Yeah, Ka'imi Fairbairn was great last week. The triumphant return off the IR. I want Ka'imi Fairbairn in most situations because, like I said, the matchup is great. And even if CJ Stroud plays, he's going to stick around here. But I actually do think that Case Keenum, the way that they're able to move the ball with this offense, not being able to capitalize in the red zone, will give Ka'imi Fairbairn enough opportunities once again to get over double-digit points. Cairo Santos of the Chicago Bears taking on the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona this week. So I think that when I look at Cairo Santos, who has definitely found his way in this lineup, and by the way, it's in Chicago. I'm sorry, it's in Chicago. He's found his way in this top 12 rankings recently. You know, last week was a little bit disappointing. I didn't get what I was expecting. We only got 6 fantasy points from him. It was not his best. But I do think that this is another good opportunity for him to do well. I mean, this is a guy who has missed 4 kicks this year, but he still has a leg at 55 yards and is crawling his way up to close to 9 fantasy points per game because this offense has been moving better. Against the Cardinals, they kind of are an offense that beats themselves a lot of the time. So let's say that Arizona lets them get down there at the 30, 40 yard line, and so they could kick a field goal. I could see that happening because I don't think their offense is, going to get out of their own way every time they have the ball, unfortunately. So Cairo Santos definitely inside the top 10. Jason Myers at 11, taking on the Tennessee Titans this week in Tennessee. So Jason Myers is actually hit or miss very much as well. Jason Myers averaging over 9 fantasy points per game. And sometimes it's great with Jason Myers. Like sometimes he has upside for about 15 to 20 points. But he also has a really low floor, as most kickers do. But Jason Myers last week, 9 fantasy points, and that was against the Eagles. Now against the Titans, I think they're going to be able to move the ball better. And so, whether it's Drew Lock, whether it's Geno Smith, Jason Myers in this matchup is going to have opportunities to get this ball through the uprights because I believe that he could easily have another 2 to 3 field goal attempts in this game. Chase McLaughlin rounding it out at number 12 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. His first time being here. Congratulations. Tampa Bay this week is taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars in Tampa Bay. So obviously, Chase McLaughlin benefited a lot last week from Baker Mayfield having the game of his life actually against the Green Bay Packers. And I think that Chase McLaughlin ultimately does have upside as long as Baker Mayfield keeps playing like this. So this particular week with the matchup they have against Jacksonville, also a leaky defense, nasty defense. They can't really stop a nosebleed right now. So I don't think exactly that Baker Mayfield is going to be stopped. Now, do I think Baker Mayfield's going to be that efficient again? Get the ball in the end zone that many more times? I have a hard time seeing that, to be honest with you. So I do think that, there's a likelihood that we could see Chase McLaughlin have more points, actually, because I do think that they might stall out a little bit more this week just because Baker Mayfield is still Baker Mayfield and he's not a top 10 quarterback in this league. So Chase McLaughlin comfortably here at number 12. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 16 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for Week 16 fantasy football, click on this video right here.